So, welcome. And like Sarah said, congratulations to all of you. I'm Janet Warburn, and for many of you, it's the first time I've seen your faces, so it's very exciting. The researchers, I know a lot better. So today, in the next hour for educators, we're going to be going over the program and kind of what to expect, and we're going to get to know all of you a little bit better. And then following this first presentation, we're hoping that researchers have a little bit more time. We'll try to make it short and sweet, but we want to have something that's specially focused for you. Last year we did it late in April, and I'm like, ooh, we should have done it much earlier, but that's just the way it was. So a lot of today is going to be me screen sharing. So once we kind of go do round robin introductions very quickly, I'll go to the presentation that I want to share with you, and then there's other pieces where you'll pop in and put your screens back on or video back on if you have it, or unmute yourself and respond to some of the things that we're going to be asking through this presentation. And it is being recorded, so if for something happens and you have to go, don't panic. We'll share the archive with everybody. So let's just start very quickly. I had everybody rename themselves, but please state your name and where you're located, whether you're a teacher or a researcher. We'll have more of that coming up, so don't get too involved because we'll come back to that. So I'm just going to go virtually around my room here. Erin Towns, you're first up.
Hi, everybody. My name is Erin Towns. I am a global educator at Edward Little High School in Auburn, Maine, and I teach a variety of global studies classes.
All right. Thank you. Steve Oberbauer.
I'm Steve Oberbauer. I'm professor and chair of biological sciences at Florida International University down in Miami, Florida.
All right, welcome. Bill Henske. You'll have to pronounce your names for me.
That's right. My name is Bill Henske, and I teach middle school science and sustainability in a town right outside of St. Louis, Missouri.
All right, and Jeremy May.
I'm Jeremy May, and I'm a postdoc at Florida International University. And yeah.
Okay, Sarah. You can say hi.
There's two Sarahs.
Oh yeah, Sarah Bartholow. Well, see, you just
Hi.
Sarah there, so.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Sarah Bartholow, helping out as doing contract work with PolarTREC.
All right, Tammy.
Hey everybody, I'm Tammy Aurelio, and I'm a high school teacher at Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida.
Nice. Judy Fonstock.
Hi, I'm Judy Fonstock, and I work for ARCUS, specifically PolarTREC, and I am based out of New Hampshire.
Amy Moran.
Hi, I'm Amy Moran. I'm a professor in the School of Life Sciences at the University of Hawaii.
Elaine Krebs.
Hi, my name is Elaine, and I am the lead educator of public programs at the California Science Center in Los Angeles.
And Leah McRaven.
Hey everyone, yeah, you said it right. My name is Leah McRaven. I work at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. I'm working in the same lab as Bob Pickart as a research associate.
Great, welcome. And Evie, I don't know how to say your name for sure.
Hi, I'm Evie Fashon, and I work at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution with Donald Anderson, who couldn't make the call today.
Okay, that explains some of my missing heads in my picture here. Kuba?
Hi everyone, my name is Kuba Gjanda. I'm a project assistant for ARCUS, and I've been bugging a lot of you about travel and logistics for the orientation.
That's always a good bug to have. Jim Madsen.
Hi, Jim Madsen. I've just started a new position at UW-Madison, so now Executive Director of the Wisconsin Ice Cube Particle Astrophysics Center. And so.
Wow, congratulations, Jim. Who knew? Sarah Johnson.
My name is Sarah Johnson. I am an independent educator I have a business called Wild Rose Education based in Carbondale, Colorado. And I could tell you lots more, but.
Yes, we have an alumni in Carbondale. Jenny. I think it's.
Hi. Yeah, Jenny Mclaren. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Biological Sciences at the University of Texas at El Paso.
All right, welcome. And we have Lee and Dave.
I'm Lee Wellhouse. I'm an instrument technician at University of Wisconsin-Madison.
I'm Dave Michalajczyk. I'm also an instrument technician at UW-Madison.
All right, welcome. And Martin.
Greetings. So I'm a narwhal researcher. I have a few hats. I'm a private practicing dentist, and I have academic positions at both Harvard University and Case Western Reserve, as well as being on staff at the Smithsonian.
That is a lot of hats. All right, Cassie.
Hi, I'm Cassie Kautzer. I'm a general middle school science teacher in Northwest Arkansas.
All right, welcome. And Robert Picker.
Hi, I'm Bob Pickard. I'm a physical oceanographer at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, and I'm working with Leah and Evie, who are both on the call.
Okay. And we have John down there.
I'm John Pazal. I'm a high school biology teacher from outside of Chicago.
Okay, and looks like we have Eric.
Yes, hi, I'm Eric Filardi. I am an English and engineering teacher in Nenana, Alaska, right in the interior of the state.
And we have Ignatius. No, you're muted still. You have to unmute. You find it?
Okay, here I am. Hi, I'm Ignatius Rigger. I'm a climatologist, oceanographer, meteorologist at the University of Washington. I work with John Woods, who looks like he's also called in the Arctic Buoy program.
Excellent, welcome. And John Woods on the phone.
Yep, John Woods with the Office of Naval Research Global in Washington, D.C.
Excellent. Yeah, pretty good turnout, I'd say. Excellent, thanks everybody. So with that, you can keep your videos on or whatnot, but I'm about to screen share with you nothing. Never mind. Oh, stop sharing my crazy desktop. Okay, hold on. Sorry. There's always something when you screen share. At least it was. Oops. Okay. Now we can screen share. And okay. I think that's the right one. Oh, sorry. Get you all sick here. Okay. So the next little bit, we're going to go over the program and some things that you might have read online or you might have heard during those phone calls way back when, or maybe somewhere in the application process, just so that we can kind of all be on the same page as to what our program is about. This year, we're, or actually we have a 3-year award with the National Science Foundation. And if you happen to look it up, it's actually called STEM at the Poles versus PolarTREC. So you will see that title every once in a while appear because it's the official title of our award this year. This is just to give you a quick snapshot of the staff and who you might be interfacing with, whether you are a researcher or an educator. For the educators that are going to our orientation in March, you will meet in person Ronnie Owens and Zeb Pauley, and of course myself, Judy, and Sarah. and you will also interface with Cuba for a day or two as well. Joed, you'll meet him virtually through training. So sometimes we get a disconnect between ARCUS and PolarTREC because they have their own virtual presence and things like that. And once you're in PolarTREC, you just tend to focus on PolarTREC. But I wanted you to rest assured there's an organization behind the program, and that's ARCUS. If you aren't familiar with ARCUS or have been to the actual ARCUS website, which is arcus.org, there's a lot of information there about how we interface with the research community and the researchers across circumpolar Arctic. We are a member-based organization, so if you like the work you're doing at PolarTREC or any parts, we encourage you as individuals or as organizations to become a member of ARCUS as well. So I'll just leave it at that. This year, as I just mentioned, we are supported by NSF. It's a 3-year award. We're in year 2 of our, we're year 2 of our award, maybe year 3, I don't know, somewhere in there. We're starting our year 3. We are supported through this program with Arctic logistics support contracts through Polar Field. I heard that they're in negotiations and probably going to be awarded, and the Antarctica support contract takes care of Antarctica people. More about that coming up. Very quick, this is online and you can read more in depth about it, but this is our vision and our purpose behind our program. It is professional development for educators and hopes to foster enthusiasm and awareness about the polar regions, particularly with the next generation, we hope, of scientists, but at least next generation of public, and hopefully they become STEM literate through this process. Our objectives are outlined below, but basically it's to increase STEM content knowledge, and we'll talk a little bit about STEM in a bit. We also want to increase the use of STEM practices. We hope that educators can start to identify with STEM networks and groups and the science community. We hope that everybody will increase their collaborations, and I'll explain this in a little bit as well, between formal and informal educators that are now making up our participants this year, and increasing students and engagement and learning about the polar regions. And then of course, we're also always looking for avenues to sustain and help foster relationships between the research community and the education community. So with that, we're going to come back online again, and I'll stop sharing just a moment, but I would like you in a moment to pitch yourself. Most of you just said where you're from and what your location is, but can you tell us your primary job and which research project you are participating in and or researching? So I'm going to stop sharing that slide, and we'll go round room again, but I'll go reverse this time just for fun, and we'll pick on John Woods. So John, you got to state who you are again, your primary job, and which kind of research project you're working with, and your educator you're working with.
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm only going to take half my time because I want to give half to Ignatius. But I'm at the New York Office of Naval Research, like I said, in Washington, D.C. I'm working on international collaborations with Arctic nations on science and technology needs. And specifically for this project, I'm doing it through the collaboration with the International Arctic Buoy Program that Ignatius runs. Our researcher is Sarah. She's been great so far. We've already integrated her into our team. And we're looking forward to going up to the North Slope of Alaska in late March and early April to go out on the sea ice and deploy some buoys, as well as do some outreach activities in Anchorage. And Ignatius, if you want to tag team on that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so we work on the Arctic Buoy program, and we do some field work ourselves, which we'll drag Sarah along on. But no, others on this call, like Leah and Bob Picard, also help us deploy buoys from the Healy. And I try to piggyback on anything I can, because otherwise I'd be in the field all year long. But yeah, it'll be fun. Especially the Barrow trip. It'll be good to walk on the ocean and take snowmobiles out.
Fun. Sounds good to me. All right. We'll just I'll go right straight to Sarah so I can kind of keep you guys together. So Sarah.
Yes. So I said I worked for Wild Rose Education, and so a lot of my work is around youth water leadership development, teaching young people how to participate in civic life. And also I do a lot of teacher workshops. I teach as an adjunct faculty over at Western Colorado University and do all kinds of different professional development workshops for educators. And so I am an informal educator, and like John and Ignatius said, we have jumped right in because we are leaving on April 1st or April 2nd, one of those 2 days. And I'm really excited to be able to just be for so many parts of this.
Very good. All right, we're going to turn it over to Eric.
Sorry, I had to unmute. I am going to be working with the Woods Hole team, specifically Dr. Donald Anderson, in research on harmful algae blooms in the Bering Sea, the Chukchi Sea, and the Beaufort Seas. And we'll be traveling out from Nome, Alaska on the U.S. Coast Guard ship Healy, which I just found out is the largest icebreaker that the U.S. Coast Guard owns. And I'm incredibly excited for this sort of research. And I think one of the biggest reasons that I have such excitement is because I currently work at a boarding school here in Alaska that houses about 100 students from roughly 40 different villages across the state. And the research that we're going to be doing as part of this expedition actually ties into the subsistence lifestyles that many of our kids, especially those that are in the coastal regions, use to sustain their families and their villages. So there's such a meaningful impact to the sort of research that I'll get to be involved with. And I'm just terribly excited for it for that reason alone.
Awesome. Welcome, Eric. I know, Evie, you're part of that. Is there somebody else on the screen too that's part of that team? Okay, so, all right, Evie, I'll let you go and then turn over to Lee.
Yeah, all right. So as Eric mentioned, our mission is to study harmful algal blooms in the Bering, Chukchi, and Beaufort Seas, and we're going to be going out on the Coast Guard cutter Healy to do that sampling this July and August. So the Anderson Lab at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution focuses on harmful algal species and their biology and ecology, why do blooms happen where they do and when they do. And one really awesome aspect of this project is that it's a partnership between the biological side, which is what our lab does, and also physical oceanography, so looking at the currents and the oceanographic features that influence where these cells are occurring. So maybe Bob and Leah can talk a little bit about that.
Hey everyone. So I'm Leah McRaven. Evie, I think you pretty much pinpointed it. So while we're out at sea, we'll be working with a science party of, now it's looking close to 45 people, which is a lot of scientists from many different institutions. So we have these core pieces to the project, which is the harmful algal bloom research and our sort of study of the ocean currents and ocean temperature. But we also have members who will be doing marine mammal observations, marine bird surveys. Last year, we actually collected a dead bird from the water to have it analyzed for harmful algal bloom toxicity, and a number of people doing chemistry of the water, so oxygen content, things like that. So it's a very collaborative environment and very unique in that we work together with the Coast Guard when we go out.
Excellent. Sounds fun to me. All right, we're going to move on to Bob Pickard.
Okay, so I won't say too much because we just heard from Leah and Evie. But
yeah, I wasn't sure which.
We are an interdisciplinary team, as they both said. We got a huge cruise. I'm very excited, like Evie said, to bring together the physics and the biology. I'm senior. I've been on Healy many times, and but never with a PolarTREC teacher. It's nice to meet you, Eric, and I'm looking forward to working with you and everyone else.
All right. All right. We'll go to Jim Madsen.
Hi, I'm Jim, and as I mentioned, I work at the Wisconsin Ice Cube Particle Astrophysics Center, which is the agency or group that runs the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory, the South Pole. So we've been taking teachers to Antarctica for 20 years or so, right? Very excited to have Elaine. What we do is we built a very strange type of telescope using the ice at the South Pole, which is about almost 3,000 meters thick. So we put light sensors in a cubic kilometer of ice and look for these almost invisible particles called neutrinos. And they're very common, but almost impossible to detect. So you need this giant detector, and with this big instrument, we see about 1 neutrino every 6 minutes. So, and we do discover amazing things. So, yeah.
It is fun. So Elaine.
Hi again, I'm Elaine, and again, I work at the California Science Center, which is one of the largest museums here in the United States, and we cover all sciences. We have the Space Shuttle Endeavour, we also have a large aquarium, and I'm in charge of both our on-site programs, so like homeschools, field trips, and then I also do our off-site programs, so we do community events, or we run traveling labs in various schools. So yeah, I'll be going down with Jim Madison and his team from University of Wisconsin in December to the South Pole. And I'm really excited because we are opening a $300 million Air and Space wing at our museum. So I'm looking forward to develop some new programs, maybe some exhibits, lots of really cool things to do.
Very cool. All right, we're gonna go to John Pasol.
I'm John Pazel. Again, I teach biology, AP Bio outside of Chicago. I'm going to be working with Jim Thompson from the University of Washington. We'll be on the Sikuliak from Nome, Alaska, up to the Chukchi Sea, looking at ocean wave coastal dynamics. So the relationship between what's happening from less ice and the waves and erosion. I'm really sort of very interested in it. I had the opportunity about 10 years ago, I was out on the Healy, so to really be able to get a comparison to see what, how the Arctic has changed in that 10 years. And also because we're having some of the same issues that coastal Alaska is having here in Chicago and along the Great Lakes. As there's less ice cover and higher water levels, we're having tremendous erosion. So it'll be a great opportunity to connect my students with the actual research that we're doing.
Okay, great. And I don't think your researcher's here, but Sarah, do you have anything you want to add about Jim?
So he's coming from the University of Washington, and I think John kind of explained the research really well, looking at coastal erosion and the oceanographic factors that affect it.
Okay, cool. Let's see. We're going to Jennifer Johnson.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. So my name's Jennifer Johnson. You'll see me named as Jen Heydrich too. There's sort of a story behind that. But I teach world history at an urban high school in Maine. It's called Edward Little High School. I also teach climate policy and anthropology. So I teach social studies with a focus on bridging the gap between science and humanities. So I'm working with Dr. Jenny Mclaren. She is an incredible researcher. I've been doing some research on her research. We'll be hiking into the Yukon Territory to examine the alpine tundra and boreal forests. There's a peek at carbon sequestration, but also simply the fact that it's a high-risk environment for impact from climate change. Obviously, it's super important to focus on changes in plant and animal species composition and biodiversity. So that's what this experiment looks at. It's actually being done in different places all over the world. So it's a long-term project that's a piece of a global puzzle. So that's what we'll be looking at. Plant ecology, trophic cascades, biodiversity, and apparently a lot of hiking up into the mountains. I've heard a lot about boats in this, so I'm kind of excited to be on the actual ground doing this.
And with that, we'll turn it over to Jenny. She can
Great.
add to it.
Yeah, so I'm Jenny Mclaren. I am, I guess, a plant ecologist or biogeochemist, ecosystem ecology. I define myself in different ways depending on the audience. But my lab looks a lot at how changing plant communities impacts the way that ecosystems work. And so Jennifer did a great job of explaining the types of things we're looking at in the Yukon. The main experiment that we're focusing on there is a warming experiment where we have basically small warming chambers at different elevations in the alpine tundra and are looking at the impacts on plant community species structure, but also ecosystem properties. And it's part of a larger network. We call ourselves, we're the WARM network. It was just handy we could make warming and removal in mountains turn into the acronym WARM. There's about, I think we have 13 sites in 11 different countries, all in alpine environments. So we've got sites from Greenland to China, Argentina, New Zealand, all have the exact same experimental design running in these alpine ecosystems, so we can kind of get a more global picture on how warming affects alpine tundra plant communities.
Oh, that sounds interesting. All right, thank you both. Looks like I'm going to Cassie now.
Hi there. I think, yep, I unmuted. I'm Cassie Kautzer again. I'm a middle school science teacher in Northwest Arkansas, this year teaching primarily 6th grade, just general science. And I also coach a first LEGO League robotics team that is pretty competitive, so that's exciting. I will be working with Lee and Dave, I think they're on here, as from the University of Wisconsin and the Antarctic Automatic Weather Station project. And I am really excited, and my students are really excited to get a view, kind of because the weather stations are all over Antarctica. But I'm excited to look at real data and to let my scientists or my students see, you know, kind of science in the real world instead of just this is what we do in our middle school lab classroom. And I'm excited to get to learn more about the technical side of installing and fixing and kind of maintaining such a project as the automatic weather stations.
Well, you have a fun team, I know from past experience, so we'll turn this over to Lee and Dave.
So yeah, we're Lee and Dave. We're with the Automatic Weather Station project with the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And we're actually in our 40th year now, which is kind of a cool thing. And this season we'll be going down to Antarctica to primarily maintain our network. We have about 60 weather stations scattered around the continent, and the goal will be to visit probably 20 to 25. But one kind of exciting project we're getting to work on this year is we're installing a new tall tower system. We have a single tall tower in the Ross Ice Shelf that's about 100 feet tall with 6 levels to study the boundary layer. And we're installing another one in West Antarctica at the Bird Field Camp. And it's a very similar design, 6 layers of temperature, wind speed, pressure, humidity, just getting all the atmospheric variables through the lowest part of the atmosphere.
Good, cool, thanks. And it looks like Martin, we're up to you. You're muted. We can't hear you, Martin. There you go.
There we go. So I'm a dentist by profession and a narwhal researcher. The narwhal, if you don't know, has got probably the coolest tooth on the planet, and no one really could quite figure out what it was doing in terms of its functional significance. So it was an issue I tackled about 20 years ago. I've worked with NSF, long-term relationship there, and really focused on functional significance, although we've diverted our attention in different directions. And interestingly enough, very excited to be a part of this program since we have had a long association with incorporating traditional knowledge, Inuit traditional knowledge with science to really direct our studies, and have found it to be an extraordinary experience. Both in terms of the outcomes that we've had and also in terms of giving recognition to voices that don't always get to be primary authors on papers. So I've been a big advocate to get Inuit folks as authors on our papers, and now are really focused on bridging traditional knowledge with STEM science, so that you don't have to go to get a graduate degree before you're introduced to an indigenous perspective. It's really another way of learning that we think is vitally important, and in many ways can help instruct and direct and even challenge science in very helpful ways. They both can help each other. And I've been at conferences where they sometimes don't always have that union of congeniality or collaborative approach. And our real mission this particular time is to really find ways, both on the indigenous side and also on the science side, to find ways that we can make this mutually beneficial. So we're bringing some interesting folks up. We have Joe Rohde, who's the executive director for Disney's Imagineering. We have Harris Lewin, who's the director of the Earth Biogenome Project. I've also directed the Narwhal Genome Initiative, which is a very ambitious study between about 20 institutions worldwide to get the narwhal genome sequenced and assembled. We've already done about 25 different assemblies, for those of you who can appreciate how much work that is, and really want to get into a better understanding of this tooth that, from my perspective as a dentist, defies every principle and property of teeth I ever learned. So it's exciting, and we're very happy to have a teacher on board, because not only is this, I think, instructional for the teacher to bring back as a lesson about research, but this will also be an input standpoint from a teacher to tell us how we can best translate some of the information into the classroom.
Excellent. And just in time, I just got a ding that Kathy might have just joined us. Oh, there you are. Sorry, I had to look for you. Good timing. Kathy, we're just going around. Everybody's introducing themselves and their connection to the research project. So Martin just spoke, and it's your turn.
Yeah, and I'm super excited to be working with him over the summer. And I am the high school teacher at the Packard Children's Hospital School. So it's the children's hospital that's attached to Stanford City. So our students are basically inpatients here at the hospital. I work mainly with the high school students, but it's a kindergarten through 12th grade program. And
Whoops. You froze up on us there, Kathy.
uh-oh.
Well, let's see. You stopped and you told us what the age group at the hospital. So sometimes if you stop your video, that helps. So maybe stop your video real quick.
Okay, stop video. Okay. Let's see. But one of the things that I am really excited to do at the hospital is introduce kids to science, because we before did not have a very strong science program. And we also had a really hard time getting some kids excited about the outside world, mainly because you know, a lot of them are in isolation. They are literally not able to go out and experience the world. And so that's one of the things that we've really been trying to work on. And it's one of the reasons why I am really excited to be working with a researcher and making that connection, and then hopefully going to be able to bring that back to the classroom and kind of show them that, you know, we're all connected to each other and to places that we might not think that we would ever get to go to.
Very good. And that did help with your bandwidth, by the way, turning off the video. We didn't turn it back on since you aren't talking. Okay, thank you. I think we'll go to, sorry, Amy Moran.
Hi, I'm Amy, and I'm a professor at the University of Hawaii, like I said. And our project is based out of McMurdo Station, and we're a sea ice group, so we mostly scuba dive for our animals. And I'm a marine biologist and sort of an ecophysiologist, and our project focuses on the effects of small changes in temperature and oxygen that are climatologically relevant on the development of a number of different invertebrate species. And so we work with sea spiders and nudibranchs, and it's an amazing place, and it's really, really fun to work. And we're really excited to have Tammy with us.
Very good. And speaking of Tammy, go ahead.
Hi. So, like I mentioned before, I'm a high school science teacher. I teach AP Environmental Science and Marine Science. And so I think this expedition is going to fit in perfectly with what I teach because it's got the oceanography aspect to looking at the oxygen levels in the water and temperature of the water. And then it brings biology in and seeing how the physical part affects the development of the invertebrates. So I'm really excited about that, being able to tie it into both the classes I teach and also bringing, Antarctica into South Florida, because obviously our kids down here, a lot of them haven't even ever seen snow. So this is going to be a whole new experience for them. All right. Thank you, Tammy. It looks like I'm to Jeremy and Steve. So I'll let you guys talk about your project.
All right, I'll go first. I'm Jeremy. I'm a postdoc at Florida International University, and our project is primarily based in Toolik Lake, Alaska, but also in Barrow and Akasuk. And so it's a long-term vegetation monitoring project where we're looking at scaling from the plot scale to the landscape scale. And I will let Steve take it from there.
Yeah, as Jeremy said, we have this research project. It's a long-term monitoring project. The vegetation plots go back over 30 years. And in association with this monitoring project is the forebear of the WARM project, the ITEX project, the International Tundra Experiment that's been running for 25 years, a long-term experimental warming of tundra using passive warming with open-top chambers. Associated with these long-term vegetation plots, we have an automated system that does daily measurements, similar to what satellites do, but it's at the very local level across a gradient in the vegetation of 4 sites in northern Alaska. Again, like I said, the gradient, Creek and Toolik. So it's spanning a good gradient across the climate in northern Alaska, and it's spanning, each of these transects spans the hydrological gradient at these sites, from the driest conditions to pretty much the wettest conditions. And what's really cool about this project is that we collect data every day. So we have manual measurements done every week on the ITEX plots, but across this gradient we do daily measurements using some pretty big array of instrumentation that's taking it's kind of the tricorder of the tundra. It's taking all kinds of readings of vegetation. But the idea of looking at changes in phenology, changes in vegetation composition, and we're also interested in how those changes in vegetation affect the ecosystem function. So things like carbon flux.
Cool. All right. And your teacher's not here, so Sarah's going to speak about her.
Yep, I think Liza's teaching at the moment. So Liza Beckman is from Brooklyn, New York, and she teaches at the Brooklyn Emerging Leaders Academy. And it's an all-girls school where she teaches earth science, chemistry, and it's a public school, but a charter school. And she hopes to make sure she gets as many young women into science as possible. That's kind of her big, big goal.
Okay, and since you have your sheet up, will you talk about Byron Adams real quick?
Oh, Byron, what shall I say? Yeah. Okay, so Byron Adams is working in the dry valleys with Bill, and Bill can probably say a little bit more about the project as well. But he's at a Brigham Young University. He's probably in the dry valleys as we speak. And Bill, I'm going to put you on the spot, and you can talk about the research. I can fill in the gaps if you want me to.
Well, I will do my best. I teach middle school, and one of the things that's really cool about this project is the focus on how we're gathering research to create better models. If you look at like our next generation science standards, it's all about modeling things and using that data to create a better picture to understand the way that things work. So what's being set up, or what's going on in the Dry Valley, is a couple different experiments in different locations to make predictive observations about that can then be used to model what will happen in response to various climate changes that are occurring or could occur in the future, whether it has to do with changes in salinity or changes in the contents of the atmosphere or the temperature or moisture levels. It's also a really good model ecosystem because there's so few organisms, and that's what's really cool about it. In Missouri, when we study the ecosystem, we have, you know, thousands and thousands of things to consider, and narrowing it down to one thing makes it difficult to understand, like how one factor might affect another. So it's a really cool way to get a grasp on how the things that are happening in the atmosphere or the things that are changing with climate over time we might project to the effects that it's going to have in the future. So I'm really super excited about that. Our middle school model is based on an expeditionary learning style. It's a public school, but we believe that by bridging, and it's a highly diverse public school. It serves a huge range of socioeconomic levels and backgrounds. And so we focus on, creating the experience first so that students can kind of like hook on their learning from that. And we often teach by showing and doing ourselves, and we never ask students to do things we wouldn't do. So there's also a really super great example that I can share with my students about taking chances and risks and doing really amazing things to get the science to them. All the things that we've come to understand, there were scientists collecting data or setting up machines that we're going to process and filter. So I'm just really super excited to be working with Byron, and this is a great opportunity for me.
Yeah, it's a good team to work with. They've had educators before, so thank you. And last but not least, Erin.
Hi there. Again, my name is Erin Towns. I teach at Edward Little High School across the hall from Jennifer Johnson, as a matter of fact. So that's been pretty cool. I am working with Dr. Sarah Doss, who works for Woods Hole, and we are working on her project of a subglacial tremor project, which is looking at the impact of surface runoff from Greenland's ice sheet. So we'll be traveling to Greenland in August. I'm particularly interested in how that impact of global sea level rise impacts the Gulf of Maine specifically. And then of course, as a social scientist, I am really interested in how that in turn impacts political, social, and economic conflict in the state, with an eye on how relationships between Maine's indigenous Wabanaki nations in the state of Maine have been impacted by that. I teach, world history. I teach a UN Sustainable Development class, and then I also oversee a foreign policy program for 4 area high schools. And one thing I think I'm really passionate about is really getting students to take informed action. And so we're looking at developing a series of citizen science projects and a number of different professional development programs for teachers who are interested in marrying social sciences and science courses.
Awesome. Sarah, can you fill in about her researcher?
Yeah, so Sarah Doss is at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, which it sounds like so many of our researchers have been or are related to that institution, which is great. She's a glaciologist and climate scientist and is currently, sounds like kind of going around the world on a sailboat. So she regrets that she couldn't make it. She didn't have connectivity where she was today.
Yeah, she's a hard one to catch up with this year. It's a very interesting experience she has. All right, I think I got everybody. Anybody that didn't speak up and I just missed? Okay. Awesome projects. Hopefully you get a nice sense of that there's informal science educators here from a variety of different kinds of learning settings. And even the teachers that would be formal classroom teachers, there's a lot of variety there too on what you teach, the types of schools, and the communities that you serve. So I'm really excited. And the other big thing, which probably maybe like people like Jim and Jeremy and Amy might have noticed, is we have some new researchers. Some totally new research and fields that we haven't covered before. So exciting, and in different locations, circumpolar Arctic, that we haven't been to. So exciting to see all this group. All right, before we have just a little bit before I want to wrap up. So I'm going to go back to screen sharing with you all, and I will get that looks share. And we're going to go to that. And just a few slides about expectations and things like that, and what happens next. So we wanted to at least start introducing you to our kind of our workflows and our process and things that we anticipate as products and commitments from both the educators and the researchers that that as you kind of come into PolarTREC. This slide hopefully isn't too daunting to you, but one way that you can look at how we do things is we focused, obviously, the expedition and going into the field is kind of the core activity, and around it are a variety of activities to help you get ready for that experience if you're an educator, and then also following the experience, helping you transfer that to wherever you work. And so we break it down into pre, during, and post expedition just for management purposes. Some activities kind of are always ongoing, and other things are very distinctive where they only happen before you go out in the field. Things happen while you're in the field and then following. So I think when the educators applied to the program, somewhere along the line, we probably said this is at least a year or more time commitment to ARCUS. It's obviously not every day, but it spreads out depending on when you're where you are in the timeline of our activities. So speaking of timeline, to the far left of the slide is kind of just a little snippet of what that timeline looks like. So for educators, your next big event that's happening will be that you'll show up in Boulder, Colorado this year for our orientation. It's March 16th through the 20th. And I want to encourage researchers. I don't have funding for you to attend. However, if you are interested in coming to Boulder, Colorado, Kuba and I can give you the details on that, and we'll also share the agenda with you, but we have a hotel and we can tell you where we are. We're going to be on the University of Colorado campus. So that's our orientation this year. So we expect all the educators to come to that. That's actually one of our program requirements because it's a lot of hands-on training. In addition to that, we have webinars that we'll schedule, and it's not, sometimes it's everybody, sometimes it's just your location, your polar region location, whether you're Arctic or Antarctic. The other activity that we do pre-field logistics calls as well as post-field logistics calls to get you kind of ready for your expeditions. Of course, you get to go out in the field, that's a commitment. And then you'll also have personal time that you'll need to do for training on everything that we've taught you. And we expect you to budget that time and figure out how it works with both your personal and work life. We also require that you spend some time learning about the science. It sounds like some of you are already doing a good job of that. And then we'll talk a lot about this at orientation, but some of you are already starting to prep for your expeditions in the spring, and so outreach activities, planning for those, what those look like. We want you to do outreach. That's part of why you're here, is to convey that science. So we expect you to do outreach. And then we have actual very specific program requirements, which for educators will go more into those at the actual orientation, like lesson plans or products that you'll develop, and then how you track those kinds of activities. The other thing, this is just a real snippet, short slide about what we cover at the education orientation. Lots of items that get covered in that 1 week, and I will share the agenda with everybody so that you can see that even if you don't come to Colorado as a researcher. From the researcher side, basically you've already started your commitment by reading application and selecting your educator, starting that communication process with them, attending this kind of webinar. There's a few more that will ask you to try to join. We ask you all join the pre-field logistics calls, because this is where we go through the details of when you're going, who's buying the plane tickets, what's to expect, what kind of gear. And then we also want you to keep having communications, whatever works best for you, with your educator and getting them prepped for the field, gear list, training that they might need to take, literature that they should read, things that they should consider while working out in the field. Of course, when they're out in the field with you, we hope you're committed to working with them very closely and fielding questions and showing them how to make the most of their experience. We will also have you vet any products that come out of their expedition, lesson plans. We have some reporting requirements, and we always ask researchers to read through them, comment on them, and then give them back to their educator. Also participate in outreach activities that you'll discuss with your educator, and then also evaluation at the end of every year. A lot of details, and be sure we will work with you along the way. If you're new to the program, we'll walk you through it all. Don't panic about too much of this. Requirements, again, this is there is a detailed program requirements. I didn't want to send it out in an email today because we need to make sure that it's up to date, but we'll make sure everybody gets the handout, a PDF of the actual program requirements. If you're an educator, you'll go through this at orientation, and researchers will send it to you as a PDF just so you have it on hand and you can double check where you are in this process. So the educator's role in the team is multifaceted, and we'll discuss the details at each of the logistics calls and then other conversations with your individual research teams, because everybody has different expectations. But in general, you're the public relations officer. You're going to be journaling from the field and sharing the experience before you go, and be integral into the team, as well as learning how to balance how you be a field assistant and that public relations officer too. And one of the nice things that we cover at orientation is there's alumni that have done these kinds of experiences before, and they'll share their process and what they went through and how they balanced that field work and online journaling and all those little details. So we'll have lots of conversations about that. The other thing that we wanted to relay to you is that we have a lot of support for the researchers as well as the teachers. So one of the things that we have is funding for your educator to come and visit you at your institution or at a meeting or something before you all go to the field if possible. And we also have travel support for after. So it's really nice if teams can get together in some capacity beforehand. Like I said, we will walk through a lot of these expectations and how education outreach planning goes together with your educator at orientation. So there's a lot of pieces that are embedded in just this one slide that I'm not going to go into today, but if you have questions about it, and we have another presentation here for researchers, we can talk more about education outreach planning and what to expect there. I just mentioned this, we do have funding for educators to travel to the research institution or lab, and vice versa. Researchers, you can go to the school or classroom or learning wherever the informal science educator works. And then there's also, we have funding for if you want to do a conference presentation and things. Usually those are after events. Just a reminder that we do work with the Polar Field Services and Antarctic Support Contractor primarily. Even if you don't, even as a researcher, if you don't have that direct relationship with, in particularly the Arctic with Polar Field Services, your educator will be supported by them. That includes their travel, their clothing. We give everybody a Mac laptop. So if you aren't a Mac person, educator, get used to it. You're gonna get checked out a Mac laptop and a camera if you want. And then Antarctic Support Contract covers all of those logistics. And we do supplement. We reimburse for lodging, to and off office, and per diem, and then excess gear for Antarctica, as well as we reimburse people going through the PQ, physically qualified process, if their insurance doesn't cover it. So more on that, and just a quick thing about that. And then I think this is important. A lot of people are wondering, like, well, now that you told me all this, how do I succeed? The number one is at the top there of this list, and that's to communicate. And I think it was Sarah that was already starting, because she's leaving with John Woods and Ignatius in less than 2 months to the field. So they've already started their communication, and I really hope that everybody else has already started that communication too, with between the researcher and educator. We'll be throwing some additional people into those communications. Some of you are already getting, we have educators or alumni that we will match with your educator to kind of mentor them along through the process. And there's already been some back and forth emails about that. And if you should start seeing it in the next couple of weeks, and for sure by orientation, who your mentor educator is, that will help you go through this process as an educator. Similarly, we have a lot of researchers that have had educators, as you heard today, and we will, if you need to bounce ideas off of someone in particular, we'd be happy to match you up with somebody like that. For the educators in particular, it's on you to practice everything that we got. We've got a very limited time to train. Some of you won't go out for an entire year from now. You still need to practice, and you're going to have to figure out how that looks in your world. And we'll talk about scheduling and making sure that you stay on top of practicing things, because once you're in the field, you can't practice, especially things like how to journal, how to take pictures, if you're using satellite phones, how to use satellite phones and things like that. So there's a lot of things that you need to do before you go into the field so that you're effective in the field. And make the most of that time. The other thing you'll hear a lot, both from the researchers will convey this all the time, and alumni, is being flexible. Plans change all the time. I think Sarah's already gone through a couple of iterations of her field expedition already. So being flexible is key to all of this. And when you're in the field, research is first. The funders are paying a lot of money to have everybody go to the field, and they want to have, and the researchers want to get their data. So researcher comes first, and then you can do everything else after. You will need to make sacrifices, sleep and fun and authority. And again, for educators, we'll talk about this at orientation, but we want you to realize you're going to be making sacrifices. You might miss family events back home because you're gone, or holidays. So think about those things as you embark on this journey. And then the reason why you were selected is because there was something else that the research team saw that you might bring to the team. And so figuring out what that is and making sure that you can use that as an asset, that's always a good thing. And I think that's it. Okay, so So from here, we want to make sure we have a little bit of moment to address any questions. Is there anybody that wants to know what's next before I go off into another little world here with the researchers? You all awake, sleep in, do some jumping jacks, yoga moves. Somebody got one? I'm gonna
I have a question that might be relevant to everybody.
Yep.
So I'm going to professional meetings in the next 6 weeks that are social studies teacher conferences and environmental education meetings and this and that. And I'd love to be able to tell them to follow some, pay attention to this, because these people are not just my colleagues, but they're friends. And do you guys have templates for like a flyer or a card or something that I don't have to graphically design, but you guys already have a template that I'm guessing all of us could probably use, something like that?
Yes. Yes. When it will get filled in, that's another answer. But we do have this one 8.5 by 11 two-sided flyer that will have a PDF and it's color and it's pretty, and it will name all of you and your expeditions and when we think you're going. Anyway, that will be generated, in the next couple weeks, now that we have everything kind of settled. So that will be available as a PDF. And then we are on social media on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And you could also reach out if you're looking for like business cards. There's some other educators that have had good examples of that they've used, and maybe they could share, alumni could share with you some that kind of thing.
Does the flyer have like specifics to how to follow our expeditions all of us?
Yes. And we'll and maybe Sarah or Judy could just type in the virtual base camp link on the website. There's one place on the website, we call it the virtual base camp. It's not the front side, and it's kind of in there a little bit, but that's just like a running list of all the expeditions. And the other thing, it hasn't been generated yet, but as soon as the project pages, your expedition is ready and edited and looks good, there will be a subscribe to journals section, so people will be able to also subscribe. So yeah, Kuba just posted up a link.
Yep, that is true. The virtual base camp is there, but the 2020 expeditions are not available through there yet. But everybody has their link to their expedition page, and that will then allow you to, later at orientation, we'll explain how we can connect to your social media stuff. And that flyer is sort of next on the list.
Yeah. Yeah, the flyer won't be too long from now because we have enough information now to make it happen. So, and everybody's headshot requires headshots. So, yeah, and if you have more specifics or you're looking for a certain type of product like that, like business cards or postcards or something like that, really the alumni has way more information about how and what worked and things like that. So I will encourage you to tap their brains with that activity.
Yeah, and I'm happy to make stuff. I do it all the time. I just thought maybe thinking about branding and logos and making sure PolarTREC looks good and making sure we're being really careful. I don't know how careful we have to be with branding and so forth. So
yeah, and one thing you can always do is just draft it and send it to us and your researcher, because the other thing you might want to have is maybe their institution, there might be pieces that we, not just PolarTREC, but the institution that they're from, that they might want to have on there. And we do have good logos, so if you get into that, just ping me for which logo you need. All right.
Thank you.
Other questions from the educators?
Yes, I have a question. Our school system in Auburn, it keeps asking about some sort of press release.
Okay.
So I don't know if you guys...
Do they normally write their own press releases?
No.
I have updated the press release that we have for 2020. So I can get that out to you, and there's lots of space there to, you know, for you to put in your expedition and your name and that sort of stuff. So if people are ready for that, I can send that out. You know, we just try to kind of like fire hose it all at you at orientation, but please feel free to ask for stuff like that. That's fine.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know also there's been some requests, and I think Cassie, sorry if I haven't responded to your need yet. I think you were the one that needed, was it you that needed the school? Yeah. So if your organization or school needs to have an agenda or an official letter to get you to know that that you're being supported and that you aren't just going on a trip to Timbuktu for the heck of it, just ping me through email and I'll get you that letter and whatever you need. So.
Perfect.
Anything else?
You don't have to answer this now, but I have questions about like the insurances we'll need. And if we're going to do that at orientation, you can just tell me that, or if I need to start now and do something, I don't know.
We will tell you mostly at orientation. You'll get another email before orientation that has some more additional information about what you need to bring to orientation that's related, if we haven't got it from you already.
Okay.
So, yeah. Yeah, but insurance for the actual expedition, we'll cover that at orientation and in your pre-field call. So don't worry about insurance at the moment. Okay. Anything else? All right, well, we're around to answer your questions. There's going to be a lot, especially for the educators and also for the educators that are leaving early spring. That's going to be coming your way. So don't feel bad about calling us up and crying and saying, I don't know what I'm doing anymore, where I'm going. No, just feel free to ping us about anything. Judy and myself and Sarah will help you as best we can. So on a note about that, it is best practice for sure to always have Janet and Judy together in an email. And if you can't remember us at all, you can always do staff@PolarTREC.com. That goes to everybody, and the people that don't need to see it will ignore it. But our info@PolarTREC.com. But Janet and Judy for sure, and then add your other favorite people on to emails afterwards. Sarah wants on too. So. All right, well, thank you. If you're a researcher, I promise I'll make it quick. We just wanted to have a wrap-up thing with you. And everybody else, we'll see you in Boulder. So exciting. Bring your swimsuits and shorts. It's supposed to be hot. I don't know. Might snow too. All right. Judy, I think I'll have you stop the recording and then start it again so we can keep